Okay. All right. So uh, this week's homework was a little bit easier. I like to give a harder homework in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
also,
easier.
I realized that it was a long weekend, so um, that's why I gave it a little easier homework. So yeah. So let's go through it. Hey Sahil, how are you? Are you there?
Yes, Emil.
Okay. How are you? I'm good. Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. And hi Bhuvneshwari. I know you cannot speak right now, but I just wanted to say hi. And if you have any questions, please feel free to write in the chat. Okay. Um, okay. So now let's look at it. So first, find the maximum value of given number array, right?
Yeah.
So there are multiple ways to do it. Okay. One way is simple. So if somebody asks you this question in an interview, you should always start with saying that uh, um, let me start the brute force way. Brute force way is a usually whenever whatever comes to your mind, right? Usually your mind will do the longest way, which is fine, right? Where you would go through each number and find the maximum, right? Then there is a JavaScript way where you can apply something that is already built in JavaScript. Okay, so let's look at what you guys have done. I think few of you have.
Yeah, I have. If you want, I can share my screen, or I can send you the this thing.
No, I think.
I can send you the solution. Is it something that we need to save it in the classroom?
Yeah. So
mine is like I was. I'm not able to save it there only. I mean,
yeah. So what you can do. Yeah, what you can do is save it in a JS fiddle and send.
I'm little new to this.
Oh, okay.
Google
Okay.
Classroom. So I was like not able to. I just mark it as a done, but I was trying to see where I can share the files. Maybe I have to do little research. So I was not able to find.
Oh, okay.
Whatever I've done, that is there in my local right now, local machine.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, we can share. Let me go through the Sahils, and then we can. I can share. You can share your screen with me, and we can look at it. Okay. All right. So Sahil has done. Okay. If reduce function. Okay. Sahil, did this work? Or when you run it, let's say console.
Yeah, it worked.
Okay.
It worked.
All right.
I put it in other comment, so.
Okay, let's try it here. I just want to see how it works.
Then my question is why you are using the return math.av? It's not needed, I guess, right?
Math.max, you mean?
I mean, rather than using this function, you can just simple statement would work here. Maybe I can share my solution once we are done.
Yeah. Let me look at this, and then we can go through your solution. So here, okay, max equal to okay.
I think I don't know why it was working alone. Like if you might be using something, that's why.
Okay.
Should not.
Okay. So do you guys know reduce function very well? What reduces?
Yeah.
Okay.
Reduces to a single value, right?
Yeah, reduces return the single value. Usually you would do it to do a sum of something. Okay.
Some max also work.
Yeah, you can do max also, but yeah, usually reduce basically you have an array. There are three functions: map, reduce, and filter. Right? Map usually creates a new array. Filter also returns smaller size of array so you can say, okay, I want only number that are over 5 or something, right? Then it will give you an array. and reduce gives you one number. Okay, and yeah, math.max would give you max of 2 numbers. Okay, so
yeah, he mean like if I try to run this alone, like then it works.
let me
But I
try
think
the JS fiddle quickly.
Yeah.
See if it's
maybe this JS fiddle has some problem. Yeah, you can take it from there. Yeah.
okay. Okay, so yeah, here it works. Okay, there's some issue with the with that thing. So okay, all right. So that's a one solution. And what else? So the second question was let's see.
Second question, I put it in the comments. It was like I was trying to do it with the for loop.
Okay.
I was able to find the length, but based on it, I was checked like what step should I take after that.
Okay, so you have hi, hello, and how are you, and you want the maximum. Which one has a maximum length, right? So you created an array, and for the length you split. Okay, and then okay, there's no need to split. You could have done the same thing here. Use you could have so let me show you. If you wanted to use a reduce, I think you could do reduce as well.
Yeah.
So for example,
yeah, we can use reduce too, but I was thinking like how can I do it with the other like for loop or like the basic way.
Yeah. So let's
however mine works.
Okay, so yeah, so let's look at the reduce is basically usually you need to do a dot, I think, is that a length, and b dot length, right? Let's see if it works. Oh, array, where is the array? Oh, this should be maximum is and oh, this should be actually.
You should check the length greater than if put a conditions there. Maybe if a dot length is greater than b dot length, then return a dot length. Else.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, but this just compares the maximum length, but somehow it gives.
It will also work because after match function also doing the same.
Yeah. Let me see.
Will return and.
Why is it making? That is strange. Okay. All right. Somehow it's not working at the ng. Okay. You can also. Okay, so let's.
For loop is also.
Yeah, let's look at the for loop question that he has done. So, simple way to do it is you can do for off loop, right? So you can say for let val of array, right? That should give you all the values. Then you would say, so then you need to keep track of the length, right? So if you have a variable, let's say let max, basically max length. Okay, let's keep it as a 0 for now, and you could say if the value I find the value of the length of the value is greater than if val dot length is, let's say, greater than max length, right? Or you need to have actually two let max string also, right? Because you need to track which string is the maximum. So if it's the maximum, or greater than what you have, then you need to do two things. Max len equal to val.length, right? Then you need to save this, and also you need to save max string also as this particular string. Well, make sense? Okay, and so in the end you can have max string. Okay, now you don't even need then yeah, length you need it because you need to, yeah, okay, yeah, this should work. Okay, all right, and let's look at okay, the third one. Okay, so what are the three different ways? So the first one is function expression, which is correct. This is function declaration, which is correct. And this is anonymous function, which is also correct. And this is immediately invoked function. Okay. And the difference between two is the function declaration it's not a variable, so it behaves like a regular function, so it gets actually hoisted on to the top, compared to function expression is saved inside a variable, so it behaves like so however variable behaves, this function also behaves like it. Okay, so that's a main difference.
I didn't understand properly.
So
like I was confused regarding.
So this function, right, variable sum function. So this is actually, I'm saving this function into a variable, right, which is sum function here, right? Now, now this is actually called name function expression, because you don't really need to do some function like this. You can do it like that. But anyway, so this is saved inside a function, right? And so because it's a variable, it will behave like a variable, right? So if whatever the scope of the variable is, compared to function declaration, which is not a variable. So what happened when JavaScript scans through the whole thing? It will take all the functions, function declaration, and somehow put them on the top of it. So even if it's defined here, it's available from the beginning of the file.
So same thing happened with this this function expression too? No.
So let's look at it, right? So I'm just gonna close this. So let's say I have a okay, they're both returning true, and we're gonna call this expression exp and declare. Okay, now if let's call it let, because let is a little different. So now if I do exp like this, what would happen?
It's not going to work.
It's not going to work because I cannot use a variable before its declaration, right? It has to be declared before line 2 and before, right?
Yeah.
So if I run this, it would give me an error saying expe is not defined, right? However, this function declaration, if I run it here, okay, let me clean this up. Well, it gives you, well, let's just say, okay, so we would know if it's really working. Okay, and if I had to, I have to console log it here. Right, so it's working. Even though it's defined here, it's somehow working here. So all the function declarations are actually hoisted Not only definition, but the actually functions are hoisted, so it's actually available before they're defined.
So Hemil, like in our application, most of the times we use function declaration, or we should use function expression
Yeah.
while working.
Yeah. Otherwise, the scoping gets messed up, right? You need to,
Okay.
use this always. Don't use this.
Function expression.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't use the
I thought
declaration.
declaration is better. Okay.
No. Do not use this. Expression is better, where you save inside a variable. Okay. Always save inside a variable. Okay. In JavaScript specifically. I don't know about Java. Java is different, but in JavaScript you always use this. Okay. Any questions? Let me see if anybody has any questions. Okay, Bhuvaneshwari, any questions? Okay, good. All right, so Hemant, I'm gonna make you a presenter. Can you share your screen, sir?
It's asking me to download something. Hard extension. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So don't look at the first one. I did some garbage something here. So the first problem was finding the maximum.
Okay.
So this is what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I used this function and it was working fine. That's not a problem.
Okay.
So second function, same thing. I'm a big fan of this reduce function. So wherever I saw, I'll try to use those things.
Okay.
So to find the maximum longest word,
right.
I also use reduce definition. So it's also working fine. If you want, I can how to test. If I want to test, then I have to create one more something. So it was working fine. So I used multiple methods. So one of the method I found is this. This is really interesting, and it is like shortest code. But the one which you explained also, the for loop, using the for loop and getting this string maximum, that is also simple. So I prefer to use in this way.
Oh, okay.
So these are the two questions.
Okay.
So yeah, and regarding this, the one which you explained, this is also I wrote here like whatever like function declaration, function expressions, so anonymous functions, and something regarding you asked regarding lexical scope also. That also is explained. So
okay, yeah, it's a process of variables.
For this, you can save like Control S and you can paste the URL directly. Like if you for this JS thing, you can Control S.
Control S.
Yeah, it will be saved.
Oh, okay, I see.
I can share this URL.
Yeah, it will work.
Okay. I have not done that. So because if I'll see here, in my bin there are 25. Whatever I am doing for each thing, I create a new bins. So it's already saved here.
Oh,
if you wanted to search it, you have to go here and see. But these are all the things I have done. Like
Oh, okay.
So it's very difficult to find it out. Which one is like for what?
Yeah, it's saving. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is the one I'm looking.
Okay.
See, no, it's not coming.
Emil, would you recommend some book for JavaScript? Like I still feel my basics in JavaScript is weak. So I bought this book, Secret of JavaScript Ninja, but still I didn't feel like I should go for that book.
I think so, Sahil. The problem with the JavaScript books is that JavaScript is changing so fast that usually it takes 6 months to 1 year to write a book, right? And by the time they come out, like ES6 came out like a few years ago. So any book that you would read before that was released before that, it's kind of useless. So if you see var as a defining variable, var, then you would know that it's not very useful.
But still, like for the basics, still I feel like my basics are not good with JavaScript.
Yeah,
I would.
I can tell you one good book. Good parts, JavaScript, the good parts.
Yeah, but Emil, that is like in a very high level. I also read that book.
Yeah.
Twice I read that book.
Okay.
But it's very difficult to understand 100%. But I assume I understand 10% out of it. It's like
It is very high level. Yeah.
Very tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, for me, what I was like, my coding basics are weak. Like.
Yeah.
I need like logical thinking for thinking. Like these questions, whatever we discussed. My friend is into Java, so I discussed with him like these are the questions I am doing. He said like it's very basic. Like he recommended some book. Let us see. He said like I studied in bachelor's. Let us see by I don't remember the author name. It's very famous, but he said like you can do this. Read the problems and try to do it with JavaScript. But it was like I didn't feel comfortable with that book.
Also, you want to be careful because JavaScript is so old and there are so many revisions that if you learn something from a very old JavaScript, you would develop the old habits, right? So for you guys, I would suggest, because now we are living in a modern JavaScript, I would suggest to learn only modern JavaScript, ES6. That's why I'm only focusing on ES6 and beyond, right? Because otherwise there are so many weird stuff in JavaScript, in old JavaScript, that if you keep doing it, then your brain would get used to those things and it'll be hard for you to forget, right? So that's why I'm only trying to make you use let, only trying to make you use like a latest stuff, right? Basic is important. Like you can use regular for loop or you can use for off loop. That's fine, because for loop still works. But I would say do not use for each loop, right? Which is kind of has a bad performance, and even if you use that in an interview, they would know that, oh, you have some bad habits, right? So I know a few books for like higher level. Okay, there is one guy has a book called You Don't Know JS, which is pretty.
It's very high.
But it's also very high. Yeah. Also very high. Yeah. So yeah, unfortunately, I was thinking of writing a book, but I'm not a writer. That's the problem.
Simple things, simple like the book which will help you understand from the basic is very rare.
Yeah.
Every author thinks in a very high level, like
Ajit, Yeah.
That's a problem.
We all are experts, so whatever they write, they think that will automatically understand, but it's difficult.
Maybe I'll create one. Maybe I'll create one. If you guys help me, what I'll do is I'll write a chapter and send it to you guys. You let me know.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. If I would understand, I would say, yeah, I can understand this.
So that you would be a good audience. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. My wife is a writer, so I can write the topic and then she can do the proofreading. So, and then I can send it to you to actually try it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading this one, Secret of JavaScript Ninja. The second chapter was DOM manipulation. They were using the old ways like dot get element ID, dot get element by class, tag names. So I was kind of like, we have now we are using frameworks, right?
Yeah.
We have data binding, so we don't need to go for that. So I skipped that chapter. I went to third chapter, but the third chapter was related to the second chapter.
That's a problem with the JavaScript, right? So I teach JavaScript as a JavaScript language, not as a DOM manipulation. So I'm not, in any of my examples, I'm not never manipulating DOM. And that I know that we're not going to do that. I will cover the once we learn some of the basics. I will cover one chapter where I'll show you how to DOM manipulation works as a concept, just in case if somebody asks you in an interview, and also it helps you when you learn like a big frameworks. Then you would think if your framework is manipulating DOM, then you need to understand how it's actually working inside, right? So, but you don't need to know a lot of those things, right? And most of the JavaScript book starts from the like HTML, how to include your JavaScript in your HTML and everything, right? Well, I try to look at JavaScript as a language and just only master the language fundamental and then just directly go to the framework.
Yeah, that's what I was looking like objects, functions.
Yeah.
That's what then object-oriented
Yes.
main part of JavaScript, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you skip all the other stuff that probably not needed because JavaScript has so many things. If you go into DOM manipulation, it has so many methods. You get lost in it and you'll never learn JavaScript.
Yeah.
So yeah, try not to even go there. Like for example, I would not suggest you to learn jQuery. Okay. Because it's useless now. I mean, maybe 5 years ago it was useful. And actually, if you use jQuery, you would have bad habits. Okay. So
that's what it is. So you want me to?
yeah. Okay. So let's look at this now. Okay. So function expression. Can you scroll down a little bit? Okay. And you guys know the difference between function hoisting and a variable hoisting, right?
Function hoisting, we know, like variable hoisting.
When you define using a var, so for let you don't have to worry about the hoisting, right? You already know that because it doesn't get hoisted. So wherever you define the variable, it starts from that point on. If you this only when you use a var, then it gets hoisted, which means its definition gets hoisted, but the value is still where it starts from, right? Compared to functions, if you have a function declaration, the whole function gets hoisted, right? Function expression, it just like because it's a variable, it behaves like a variable. So yeah. Okay.
So I have not done that CSS one.
Okay. Well, let's discuss. Okay, let's discuss that. Let me. Okay, Sahil, do you want me to make you a presenter?
Sorry.
Do you want me to make you a presenter, or not? Yeah.
Yeah, I can be, but let me see.
Or do you want to show something? Yeah.
Yeah. Should I get some request or something?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so should I discuss the CSS part?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, this one is the CSS.
Okay.
So for ID we can use like hash.
Yes.
Yeah, for class we can use dot, and
Yes.
for whatever like it's like attribute, as you told, like this one we can use an attribute, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So there is also another way to actually find the max. Let me show you how to do it. So if I go here to the assignment, one way to do it is, you already know the math function, right? You already used it max. So what it does, it it gives you, you need to pass the argument, right? So let's say if I have argument A, B, and C. So what it does, it finds the maximum of 3. So for example, if I do, let's say 10, 11, and 12, then it would find 12 as the maximum, right? So let's say if I say let max equal to this and console log it, then it would find me the max of these 3 numbers, right? So it gives me 12 here. So if somehow, if I can convert this array into this, I can actually argument. So if I want to convert array to an argument, somehow I can pass it through this. So how do I do that? How do I convert array to an argument? Anybody knows that?
Yeah, you can use this. I'm not sure, but I think math.max say triple dot a. I guess it will convert it, right?
Yep. So all you have to do is this a, and that's it. You don't have to use a reduce function here.
Yeah, I've used that one.
Yeah.
I think it's
okay. Yeah.
But one more way we can use, call, like, I was thinking, like,
yeah, you can also do call. Yeah.
Call, yeah.
Yeah.
Just a call and pass that here.
No, actually you have to use apply.
Yeah, because
and you have to say null and A.
Say A, yeah.
Okay. This is how it works, yeah. Yeah. But I would say don't use it now. I would say just use a spread operator. It's much better. Okay. So if I were to use, so let's say for the second example where you have to find the length of a string's max length, then I think you want to use reduce, right? Because of you have to find the length of. So what you did, Hemant, compare the length, which is the better way of doing it, because that you cannot use a simple spread operator.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I tried the spread one, but it didn't do. Somehow it got messed up. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's start now. So last time we covered the functions, right? Function. So we did the function declaration, function expression, anonymous function, and immediately invoked function expression. Now, the function.
The recording is going on, right? Am I sure?
Yeah, recording is going on. Yes.
Oh yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. So if you see the red symbol here, that means recording is going on. Yeah. So okay, and then usually if I for a given function, let's say if I have a function called add, right, and it basically takes 2 arguments, a and b, okay, and it basically returns a plus b. So simple function. Now, what if somebody doesn't provide the arguments? Somebody does this. How do you deal with the situation where, what you want to do here is you want to return 0, right? Because you already know that this is going to be a number, right? So if somebody doesn't provide argument, then you want to return 0. So how do you deal with that?
You can put up a conditions there, right? If a equal to if type of a or if a is undefined, maybe, then in that case we can say a equal to 0 or b, or similar case we can do for b as well.
Yes. So one thing you can do is this. You can say if type of b is not equal to undefined, then or you can also do null also, but let's forget about null, right? Then if it's not, then you want to keep b equal to basically whatever b is, right? Else you want to say it's 0, right? Yeah, this is undefined. Okay. Same thing you can do for a as well, right? But this is bad, right? Because it's too much. So do not use this. There's a better way of doing it. So do not use this. Or what?
There is an operator, where you use or undefined or value.
Yes, or there is an operator. So you can say b equal to b or 0, right?
0,
yeah. You can also use this. But you have to be careful here.
In ES6, we can specify like a equals to 0, something like that.
Yeah. So that is also another way. So I would suggest do not use this. A lot of people use this, but there is a problem with this and it's because it's a truthy falsy situation. So what this is saying is if b is null, so this is basically saying this: if it's null or undefined or 0 or empty string, okay, then b equal to 0, right? Which is fine in most cases, because the only situation I don't like is 0, right? And that is because what if I want to have a default value which is 1? So in that case, what would happen is, let's say if I say default value equal to 1, then it will make my 0 1, right? Because it says if it's null, undefined, 0 or empty string, make it 1, right? So I don't want 0 to be 1, right? So here, let's say if I did this 1, if I did this only and console log this, one and 0, right? So this is supposed to add 1 plus 0, and it should give you 1, right? But it gives me 2, which is bad, right? Because of the 0. So do not use this. A lot of people, you have to be very careful when you use this operator. It makes sense when it's something like this, right? When I only provide a, even though then it's fine, because now I'm saying that if only a exists, then make it 1, right? But if I specifically say I want 0, then it should give me 1, right? So instead of this, I would simply don't use this. Simply use this. This is called default parameters. This means if I don't provide arguments, then it's supposed to be 0. If I provide arguments, then it should be whatever I passed. So in this case, if I just don't provide anything, it will be 0. Let's say if I provide only 1, then b is supposed to be 0, right? So a is 0, a is 1 here, and b is 0. So give me 1. Let's say if I do undefined and 1, which means I'm not providing a, I'm only providing b, right? In that case, it will be also 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you pass the string like undefined as a string, put that in a quote.
Oh, then then it's gonna be. Then what do you think it's going to be?
I think it's in return maybe one undefined or undefined one. Not sure.
Okay. See, now it's gonna be undefined one. The answer is gonna be undefined one. Let's run it.
Like
That's
rapid fire round. I went for interview. They gave me all these kind of questions.
oh my god.
Undefined into infinity something.
Oh my god.
I got fired there.
Yeah.
They are calling it as a rapid fire round. So everything is like they'll take all the interviews like rounds.
Mhm.
Final round they'll give me all the questions. These questions are bullshit like this only.
Yeah, this is a bullshit question. Yeah.
Undefined, NaN, infinity.
Yeah.
So these are like, I was out of 10 questions, I was not sure whether I've corrected one or not. It was like so tricky questions and everything related to this math operation with undefined, NaN, infinity, something like that.
Yeah, that's which company was this?
Yeah, this is a startup,
Uh,
There is a startup, reputations.com.
oh my god, I would never work for them. If they don't know how to take an interview, rapid fire I understand, but asking silly questions like this, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, they're like, finally we were 5 at last round,
Mhm.
but out of 5, they said, we want 2. So let's do a rapid fire round. They gave half an hour, 10 questions. These questions you got 10 minutes, but they gave a paper only. The questions are written paper and they give a seat. You have blank seats and pen. You do math,
Yeah.
write it.
Oh,
It's
wow.
like this is all this kind of questions.
Yeah. I know them because I
I'm not
do.
sure.
I make videos and everything, but it's very hard. This stuff, right? Some of them I may not even know. So, yeah. Yeah. So because okay, what happens here if I have a string, for example, what happens is that remember whenever so just think it logically, okay? If you are a computer, okay, think of this way. If you are a computer and you are given two things to add, one is a string and one is a number, and you can convert one into another. So what would you do, right? You cannot really convert undefined string to a number, right? Well, you could actually, but the best way to do it is just convert one to a string and then concat, right? So let's say if I have something like this, texit 1, then it would say texit and concat 1, okay? So whenever you have a string and a number given like this, it would basically convert into string. Okay. Yeah, and there are lots of permutations. You can do null, 1, and all that stuff. But I would not worry about too much about this because it's so complex that if somebody asks you this kind of question, I would be glad that I don't work there.
My friend is also working there.
Oh, really?
He is not able to answer those questions,
Oh
also,
my God.
but he's working as a Node.js developer. Somehow at that time, this kind of interview was not there, but the new director came and he's like, and people are now more. So for one position, 10 guys are applying. So they wanted to reduce it. Somehow they're finding this way to reduce the paper.
Yeah.
That's how they are.
Yeah, but if they ask you, you can't do much about it. But I would suggest that, answer as much as you can. Yeah. And think it logically, right? If you're given to this situation, you obviously know this is it's not going to be a number, right? So, yeah. Okay. So this is fine for when you have, numbers as an argument. Okay. So you can use default. So this is called default parameters, right? And basically you can simply provide a value equal to value, which means, it will take that value and that thing is not okay. Now let's look at a little bit different situation.
Emil?
Yeah.
Do we call it arguments or parameters? Sometimes we call it parameters, sometimes we call it both are same.
They're both same, yeah. Yeah. A lot of people call argument. Some people, yeah. I call, yeah, it doesn't matter, yeah. Okay. So another thing is, let's say if this is supposed to be an object. So let's say if I have an object, let's say let's see this, object 1 equal to something like this. Well, it has a value 1, right? And you have an object 2. Okay. And let's think of this way, where I am passing object 1 here and object 2 here. So here A and B is nothing but object 1 and 2, right? And when I returning, what I need to do is A dot well plus B dot well, right? So it's taking two of these objects, and inside I'm adding the property val of both, right? So let's look at it. If I do this, it will give me 3, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now in this case, let's say if I don't provide any value, how do I do default parameters here?
Emil, I did not understand the question.
Okay, so remember previous example, we are setting up default parameter equal to 0, right? A equal to 0, B equal to 0, right?
Yeah.
Because we are expecting number or string as the argument. But here, we are passing objects inside this add, and we are expecting this object has a property called val, right? So here I'm passing object 1 as A and object 2 as B here. So then object A has a property called val and object 2 has a property called val. So we are adding this 1 and 2 here and returning, right? You get that point?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, let's say if I do this, right? But what I want to do in this case, return 0, because I'm not providing any objects.
Emil, one question, like can we do it like console.log in add, can we return it like this, object.pol plus object1.pol plus object2.pol, will it return the same?
Yeah,
will
but yeah, it would work, but you don't want to do that here in this case, right? So do you know the concept of pure function and non-pure function?
No.
Okay, so this is a pure function, add. Why is it a pure function? Because it takes some argument, it does a calculation based on the argument, and it returns something. So you can predict its answer, right? And it's always the same answer. No matter, if you apply the same parameters, it will have the same answer. That's why it's a pure function. So remember, I said, if I provide the same parameters, then it provides always the same, returns the same answer. So for example, here if I provide object 1 and object 2, okay, it will always give me 3 in this case, right? And that is because It's using what it's provided to it, and it's using that, right? But let's say instead of this, what if I just simply do this? Let's say if I just have A, and for B, for B, I'm just going to use object 2. Okay? So now look at this syntax. This is not a pure function because I'm only given A, and object 2 I'm using from outside the scope. So right now it will give me 3. Correct? So if you look at my argument is object 1 and is giving me 3 right now. Now if I change object 2 to, let's say, 4 here, and if I run again, even though I have the same argument, I'm now getting different result, 5. So environment outside changes, and now my value is also changing. So this is not a pure function because it's using something from outside its scope, right? But if I had done this instead, AB and object 1 and 2, okay? Now I know whatever A and B is, and based on its value, it will always give me the same answer. Okay? So this is called pure and non-pure function. There are cases where you want to use it from outside. So pure function inside a function, in that case, you can use it from outside its scope. But usually I would not suggest you to do. Simply use it something for the function, use it outside the scope, right?
So we should use pure functions while coding?
Most of the time I would suggest use pure functions. Unless you are within a function, another function, where you can use the closures or whatever, right? Like if it's a, but we haven't come to that point yet, but I'll show you when we do. Like for inner function, it should use the variable from outside the scope. Okay. All right. So here, if I want to do
default parameter something, yeah,
I can simply do default parameter simply like this, right? Okay. I can also provide a value. Right? Okay, so this is my default parameter. Now it gives me 3. Now let's say if I don't provide anything, it will give me 0. Okay. So your default parameter can be an object as well, which basically if you don't provide it, it would use that object as a default parameter. Okay. Or you can simply do this. Let's say if this object is too large, you don't want to provide like a default. I would usually do something like this. Right, so by default, I'll just provide an empty object. And then I would say if a dot val, which means if it has a val, right, then you would, let's say, you can say a equal to, if a has a val, then keep a dot, well, I just say or have a 0. Remember this function, which is basically shortened if else. Okay, and then you just add A-val plus B-val. Right. So here what I'm saying is, if I have a default parameter, if I don't provide anything here, right, what happens? My default parameter is like an empty object, right, which is not going to have anything, right? So it doesn't have a val property. Then if it doesn't have a val property, use 0, otherwise use whatever the object is, right? And something like this, okay? You can do this as well.
So when you say a.val question mark, what it is checking? It is checking whether the property exists or
yes.
Property is undefined. I mean, the property has a value. I mean, I didn't understand that.
If it exists or not.
Exists or not? Okay.
Yeah. If I say a.val, if it doesn't exist, then it would say, yeah. Another trick I wanted to show you was this.
If it exists and it has a different type, let us say, rather than we are expecting 2 integers here.
Yeah.
Rather than integers, it is something different.
Yes.
So that way it would work here.
So for the type, you still have to check.
Yeah, for the type, you should have to check.
It could have, let's say if I provide, so here you need to predict, let's say if I change this to, if I just do something else, let's say, sorry, let's say a equal to some object, right? Something like this. Oh, sorry, not a. Val equal to some object. And here also some object, right? Which should not be able to add. Then it won't work because I'm still, a-val and b-val is going to be 2 objects, and objects plus object gives you that rapid fire question answer, right? Okay, so it gives you 0, but it's still right. So yeah, you don't want to get into the situation. You already know inside the function that I'm expecting a number, right? So you can actually build your function accordingly, so make sure that you have this object has a property called val, and if it has a property called val, then it needs to be a number also. Another thing I wanted to show you was, let's say let's say if I have a object and then b and then c equal to 10. All right. So if I want to check if there is a c, how do I do that? I want to have a conditional statement where I said this object has c.
What do you want to do? I didn't understand.
So I want to check if this object 1 has a property called c, and which is a number, or at least not null or undefined.
If obj1.a.b.c
Mm-hmm.
and type of obj.a.b.c equals to something, I'm just guessing.
A.b.c.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's
Let's just do type of first. Type of, I think you have to. I think.
Console log.
But you can also say if. Let's say. Okay, but what if I did this? It says B doesn't exist, B of undefined. Okay, let's do this. Now it says C of undefined. So one thing you can do is this. If okay, so now if I, let's say, remove the whole thing, or I'll just say else not there, right? So right now it's there. Now let's say if I remove the whole thing. By B of undefined, if A basically this is saying if it has A, then check also if A has B, then check also if A has B dot C, B has C, then say there, otherwise just say not there. This usually,
right? You should going to add or not sure.
Oh yeah, I think you should put and yeah, maybe that's the reason. Yeah,
I'm not sure. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, maybe that's the reason. Yeah, that's why. Yeah, thanks for. Yeah. Okay. So even if it has empty object, it would basically won't complain. If I simply say object1.a.c, then it would complain. So this was basically saying that A should have B and B should have C. So this is an important, yeah. So this is how you can say if, C, if I want to check if C really exists or not. Otherwise, it would give you an error. If I did something like this, then I think it would give you an error, right? So this is important. Yeah. Okay. All right. So any questions on the default parameters? Okay. Good. All right. Now, did we cover spread operator last time, or did we not?
I think we have not covered.
Oh, we haven't covered, right? Okay. So
what do you say, operators?
Spread operators.
No.
No, not right. Okay, yeah. So remember the function let add equal to a function, we had the A and B, right? And it should basically add, basically return A plus B, right? Now, what if I want to have an open-ended function where I can write something like this, add 1, it should give me 1, right? If I say add 1, 2, they should give me 3. Or if I say add 1, 2, or just let's say 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, so now this should give me 6. Can we write one function that does all of that? And I can write like literally, as many as I like. and it should basically add everything.
In a function, we can use reduce.
Yes, but how do you reduce? So, okay, so here you were saying you can use reduce, right? But how do we reduce need is an array, right?
Yeah. Like I was thinking like we can add like in a function we will add like add some method like arrays converting into arrays and further can apply reduce like this.
Yeah. So how do you convert this into an array?
I'll create an empty array, then assign that values to the array. Like it would be a long process, I guess.
Okay. So that's where the spread operator comes in. You just have to do, let's say, something like this, and then you would say array dot reduce. This is called rest parameters.
Yeah, but there is one more way. If we do not use this one, then we can use this. There is a hidden parameter. That's arguments. We can look at arguments and find it out how many. And based on that, we can use. We can get whatever values are coming.
Yeah. So the argument function is there, but I would suggest not using it, and there is a reason why you should not be using it, because of this. Let's say if this is a spread, this is less an arrow function. We haven't covered the arrow function yet, right? But inside the arrow function, arguments doesn't work. So let's say if I do let's say if I don't even pass an argument, right? So there is actually, if I don't pass an argument to this function, inside there is a thing called arguments. Okay, and so this here, it should give you this arguments, right? Because I'm passing some numbers here. Okay, so it's something here like this.
Yeah, it looks like an array, but it doesn't work like an array. I know.
Yeah, it looks like an array, but it doesn't work like an array. But the problem here is it doesn't work at all, because as you can see, I don't see any values. It only works in a regular function. So if I have a function like this, now if I run this, you see it gives me all the values. Okay, and you can convert this into an array. You can simply do this array dot I think slice dot apply arguments. This is an interview question, but you don't have to do it's console log. Okay, if I did this, then it would basically convert this into an array. Okay, so now it's an array. But you don't really have to do this. That's why I'm saying that do not. It's good to know about old stuff that you used to use for this kind of purposes, but do not use arguments now in a modern, because it won't work in an arrow function, and you'll be using a lot of arrow functions. So I would say do not use it. Simply use spread operator. So here I can pass n number of arguments, and inside it would give me an array. So if I do simple console log args, this is automatically an array. This is called, so this is a spread operator is spread. Spread operator means if you put 3 dots in front of any variable, it becomes a spread operator, right? But this is technically called rest parameters. It's the meaning rest means I don't know the rest. It's whatever you give it to me. If you give me 1, I'll take that and convert it into an array. If I give me 2, I'll convert it into an array, right? That's why it's called rest parameters. So like this, so it converts into an array, right? So now if I want to add all of that, then I can use a reduce function. So I can say args dot reduce, and yeah, I can use a regular function here as well. It doesn't matter. Right? And so here it would give me, well, let total equal to this. So how would this work here? So you have a B, right? So how would the reduce work here?
Yeah.
Anybody knows?
B is the previous, B is the current value. So
yes.
say return, it will finally go to the total. So every time it iterates, it will be equal to, it will add whatever is there in the current to the whatever value in the previous.
Yes, so 1 is actually each number, and the second is the total, right? So I can say return. So what should I say? B equal to?
Total. So A plus B.
A plus B? Yes.
Yeah.
So it keeps a total basically. Yeah. Okay, and then I can console log it. Right, so I get 11. So this takes this, even if you don't provide anything, you don't have to provide any, well, just empty, right? Okay, no initial value. So what you have to do is put 0 here. Yeah, because yeah, that's what you want to do, right? So, and now it will give you, yeah. Okay. Now, let's say if I want to do something like this, the first value is I want some string, right? So I want to pass something like this, my total, and then I want to pass the, so it will say my total, let's say equal to 6. How would I do that? Here, if I do this, then let's see what happens. It converting into string everything, which is not a good idea, right? So here I want to say my total equal to 6.
So you're passing 2 parameters, one is string, another is first. Whatever is there before comma, this is a string, and remaining are the
rest parameters.
Numbers.
Yes.
Rest parameters. So then when you convert, it will be converted into the first one is the args0. We have to see what is coming in the args.
Yeah, so then you would get arg0 would be a string, arg1 would be this, 2 and 3, right? Yeah. So one way to do it is you can remove arg0, right? And save it in a string, and then just add rest of them, right? Or you can do this.
Passing one more parameter there,
yeah. So then string is automatically, first parameter is automatically this, and the rest of them are basically this, right? So here what I can do when I console log it, I can simply use that string plus total. So now if I run this, my total equal to 6. Right? You don't want to put this string in the back. Why? It doesn't, if you have a fixed argument like this, never put it at the back. Never put it at like this.
I think it won't allow, I guess. In other language, it won't allow.
Yeah, it won't allow. You always want to do in the front. Yeah.
This rest will always come to the last.
Yes, because it's a rest.
Yeah.
Yes. So anything that you already know that you're going to get should be in the front. Everything else should be in the back. Okay. Any questions?
Actually, I was lost in between. I understand this question properly now, but I had one doubt in doing that. Why we added 0, like comma 0, after returning it on line 5?
Yeah. So in the reduce function, what happens is that what is reduce? Reduce is, let's say, if I gave, let's say 1, 2, and 3. So the way reduce works is it will take the two argument a and b, right? So what is b?
B is the
total.
The last value.
The total, yeah.
The total, or a is the total and the b is the last value. Like the b will be 3. I think the a will be 1 plus 2, 3. Like this. I guess I'm not sure.
Okay, let's assume that a is a total. Let's say a is a total. Let's say, okay. And b is the value. I wouldn't say last value. It would just say value, right? Each value, basically, I should say. Each value, right? So what really happens here is that here what happens is that when you take, it takes the first number, which is 1, right? Now, what is total at that? So now, let's go through it. So initially, it takes the number 1 here. And so my b is 1, right? Because it's each value. What is the total? Total is what? 1.
Total is total would be 1 because it's 1.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then what it does, initially actually it takes the first number as a total. So the first number is total, then it takes a second number, which is 2, right? Then it would add them. So then my total becomes 3, and then my next number is 3, right?
Yeah.
So then it does total equal, well, this should be 8, so, and then the total becomes 6, right? But
yeah.
So it takes the first value as the total initially. What if I don't pass anything? Then this becomes undefined.
Okay, that's why we put 0. Okay.
So 0 is the, so if I put 0, then what it does? So it takes 0 as a first value, total, and b as a 1, right? Let's do one by one. Then it adds them. So now a is 1, and b is 2, right? Now it adds a and b again. So a equal to 3 and b equal to 3. Now a equal to 6, right? This is
like suppose we are passing empty function, then it would not return undefined, it will return 0. Right?
Yes, yes. So you are giving total the first value. If I start with 100, let's say, okay, what would I get?
106.
Let's do it. Oh, I need to remove this. 106. Got it? So this is the initial value for all the total. Okay, usually you want to do 0, right? So then if you don't provide any if the array is empty, then it would return a 0. That's the main purpose. Got it?
Okay, so this operator, what you call like dot, triple dot, args, is it will convert anything into a array, right?
It will, yeah, any argument into arrays, yeah. So here, if I look at it has a first argument which is string. So here, so it will say, okay, yeah, I have a first argument. So this map to this, right? Then I have 3 arguments, and I have a dot operator, split operator here. So it will say, okay, my arguments, this 1, 2, 3 becomes an array inside. So I get arg as 1, 2, 3, and then I'm adding all the numbers, and then I can say, so this becomes, let's say 6, and then I'm saying console log string plus total. The string is this, and then total is 6, right? So that's why I'm getting my total equal to 6.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that's good. I think we can, in terms of JavaScript, we can stop here, and then we can now look at some CSS.
Box model.
Okay, box model. All right. So we have half hour, so we can look at that.
And I have I'll go out for something at 7 o'clock. So if you can that.
Okay, sure. Okay, so now the box model. For that I usually like the code pen. It's a little bit nicer. So here what you can do, good thing about the code pen is you make the HTML and CSS like this, so that you can see the result here, right? So the box model is nothing but when you have an element. So let's say if I have a div and I can say hello, right? Every element is like, think of every element is a square box. Okay, so let's look at how it looks like in terms of box model, and then we'll look at how to understand that. This is a very important concept if you want to do CSS, because that's the first thing you will need to learn. So here, if I just take this and look at this, if I look at this underneath the styles, I have this box opens up. Okay, so let's understand. So this is called box model. If you look at inside, this is the content. Okay, outside the content you have some padding, then you have some border, and then you have some margin. All right, and as you can see, everything is a square, right? So everything in JavaScript is, CSS is squarish, or not squarish, should I say rectangular. Okay. Why do you think there's a 892 is? and why there is an 18.
892 into 8. 18.
No, actually 892 is basically, so okay, so by default every element is called a block, right? I'm just going to write it here. So every element is block by default. So what is a block really means? Remember when you were little, we had this, I don't know if you had it or not, but we have this Lego.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Lego blocks.
yeah, Lego blocks. We call them blocks because you can stack them top of each other, right? So think of every element is like a Lego box, Lego blocks. So what's a characteristic of block is block by default is you can stack them up on top of each other, right? So when you do that, you get like a stack, and when you get a stack, the block itself it's 100%. The width of the whole thing is a width of the block, right? Right. So here it is the same thing. Let's see if I can find.
I didn't understand what is the element here. You said elements are stacked upon each other, comparing the blocks. So what is a blocks basically here compared to CSS?
Every element
So
is a block.
So div is an element, or inside that content is element.
Let me find a nice image to show you. So let's say this is the image, right? Think of this, right? So I have red, green, yellow, and blue. Now let's say each element is each block here is a div. Think of this way, right? And what's the width of this whole wall? Is the width of each block, right? So think of this: whatever you make with the block, it always covers 100. It's 100%, right? And it makes sense. If you want to make a stack, the width of that stack should be the width of each element, right? Which is basically 100%. So that's what's happening here. And I can see it if I simply, let's say, provide a class. Let's say I'm going to call it A. Class equal to A. Okay. And here what I'm going to do is, remember, if I want to style this, I have to use what? Dot A, right? And I'm just going to provide a border. And the way you do border is you need to provide three things. Width of the border, so I say 1 pixel. Is it a solid or dotted? And you need to, yeah, and then you can provide some color like red or something. Okay, but at least 2 is mandatory. You need to say what is the width of the border, and if it's a solid or dotted or something. But you usually use solid, right? So as you can see, the block is covering the entire width of my page, right? Forget about the spacing around it. That's basically an illusion. But let's say if I move this, right? As you can see, now it's covering this much, right? So that means block is always 100% of my parent. In this case, the parent is whatever the parent here, which, well, the body, right? Here is the body, right? Okay, so now let's say if I just create a stack of blocks. So if I just simply do this, you see I created a stack of blocks. Got it? This is very important to understand. If you understand this, you understand CSS completely. Okay? Whenever you have most of the elements, I should not say every element is a block. There are some elements that are not blocks, but most of the elements are block.
Paragraph, if you add one paragraph to.
Paragraph is also, I think, a block. So if I say P, so let's say this one, I'm just going to change it to P. Okay? It's also a block, but the paragraph has it puts some spacing in the front or something, as you can see, right? But it's also a block. So if I do this, it also kind of shrinks, right? So it takes up whatever the parent's size is, it's taking that size. So that is why you were seeing that in the box model, you are seeing this size. This is, so the first number is nothing but the size of the parent. Okay. What is the second number? Is the height. What is the height? How do you determine what the height would be?
It's a default, right? Browser default height, something browser is assigned.
No, it's a height of the, so this is the block, right?
1174.
So 1174 is the width, right? Which is nothing but the window width. So if I shrink this, as you can see, it's also changing, right?
So where these 18 comes, width and height?
It's a height of this element. It's the font size. It has a font size. So hello has a specific font, right? And there's a default font size for every web page. I think it's a 16 or so. And then it adds like a one pixel top and a bottom. And you can look at it if I do, let's say, compute it. And all I have to do is font size, then I get 16 here. Okay. So it's 16 plus, it gives you, as you can see, it gives you like a 1 pixel top and bottom. So that's how you get 18. So the width you understand, right? Which is the width of the parent, whichever parent it is in. For example, let's say here, let's say I wrap the whole thing into another div. And I'm going to call it class P as a parent. Okay. And here I can give it a style P. So P is also a block, right? Because it's a div. So I can give it a size. So I can give it a width. So by default, it also covers the entire thing, but I'm just going to say width is, let's say, 200 pixels, right? Now everything shrank. Why?
Everything sinks because you have only declared div class equal to P. Oh, you are putting that in everything inside one div.
Inside one div. That's why. Yeah. So, well, I should just do this. Yeah. So what happens now? My parent P is 200 pixels, right? And then I put everything inside. So these are all the blocks that's going to take the parent size, right? 100% of the parent size. So now if I look at this, I would get, now I get 198. You know why? Because of the border, but that's fine. So you don't get always like 100%, but it does, it will be vicinity of that. So you need to understand when you do the element. So if I give a border to, let's say, P, for example, border 1 pixel solid, and let's just give it a red. Okay. Let's remove the border from here. Okay, so now it's 200, right? But because I gave it a border, my body now shrinking. Okay, so by default, I have yeah, go ahead.
So if I wouldn't give any width, by default, it will take the width of the browser. If I give some width to the parent or some element or some block element, then it would take the width. It will define the width there, whatever we are defining.
So yeah. So here, if you look at this, right? So actually think of this: the whole parent and everything is inside a body of a browser, right? So browser body is nothing but the entire this wide area, right? So however big my browser is, it's just gonna take that shape. So if I don't provide any parent any width, the parent becomes 100% of the browser width, and then all the children are inside the parent, so the children also will become 100% of the parent. But if I restrict the parent to 200 pixels, that means all the children are also restricted to 200 pixels.
But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hemil.
Yeah.
While working, like I feel like when I was using pixel.
Yeah.
Suppose I give some width or suppose I give some length, height in pixels.
Yes.
So it will show different in my laptop. It will show different in bigger screen. It will show different in mobile screen.
Yes. Height or width?
Height. Anything. Height. I think that was problem with height. So should we use media queries for that?
No.
To solve that issue?
I think you're just going too ahead of yourself, because if I want to look at the for example, how would it look inside let's say mobile? I can actually, in from here, I'm just gonna change this to mobile view. Okay, it's still showing 200.
Yeah.
Okay, so here I can actually control that, and yeah, so as you can see, it's still 200. So maybe what happens, whatever you're looking at, it's more like it has a special configuration. So you can do media query where you can say, if it's a mobile, then I want this big, otherwise I want this big. Okay, but that's a different thing. What I'm suggesting is that regardless of that, if you look this inside a mobile device or an iPad, pixel means it's going to be exactly the same length everywhere. Okay. Points.
I'm not able to understand how this last this thing came.
Which one?
Like when you define 200 pixel.
Yes.
What are 1 pixel? How this output came? I mean, logically, how it is coming? I didn't quite get that. It's like.
So, okay, let's understand this. So let's say if I just remove the parent, right? So what's his parent right now? Its parent is what? Body? Right now, everything inside a body, right? So I can simply say body, and inside I can say width is, let's say, 200 pixel. Okay, and I can also give border, so I can see what exactly how it looks like, right?
Yeah.
So now my body is nothing but this red line.
Body is okay. You define parent width
Yes.
using the body.
Yes. means my web page's body, it should be 200 pixels. Okay? And so my entire web page now shrink to 200 pixels. Okay? Forget about the height. Okay? Just if you want to learn this, learn in a systematical way. So let's think about blocks and width. Forget about the heights right now. Okay? So by default, I can, if it's a div, if it's a block, it takes 100% of its parent. Right now, parent of all these divs and paragraph is nothing but the body, right? If I don't provide any value here, any width here, then it would take the entire web page, right? Now it became like the entire web page. Now this is actually inside this code pen, so you'll see this margin around it, but don't worry about that. Think of this as actually covered by the entire web page, right? And inside I have 4 elements. Now what's the width of this element? Okay, I can check it if I just provide a border. So I can say border 1 pixel, solid, let's say green. Okay, now you can see it exactly the same as its parent. So if I change the parent's width to 300 pixels, it will shrink to 300 pixels. Everything inside, all its children would shrink to 300 pixels, right?
Oh yeah.
Got it? So here the body is a parent, but you can actually have another parent called P, and then it would do that inside, right? So rule is, if it's a block, it takes 100% of its parent. Yes? That's the first rule, right? And you always remember that. Height is based on what the content. So let's say if I remove hello from here, like first one, second one, so I can only see the border, right? Height becomes 0. So height depends on the content. So for a block, if I don't give any content, the width is 100%, height is 0. If I give some content, the height of the content becomes my height, but the width is 100%. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Think of it as this block. So this wall I made, because it's a block, it's always 100%, right? The width of this wall. Now, what if I did this way? Now the width is not 100%. Width is at size of all the block, all these. This is called inline blocks, right? So I have 4 inline blocks. So now the width is actually, you add all the size, all the width of all 3. Okay, but we haven't gone to the inline block. So I just want to do one step at a time. I think it's very important to understand this. If you don't understand this fundamental of CSS, then you will always be confused why this is happening, right? Because people think that whatever width you give, if you don't give a width, you don't know what's going to happen. So always think block means 100% width, and height is your content height. It might have like 2 pixels here and there, but it's basically content height. So let's add those things back. Now I have hello, right? Now what if I change the font size? So font size, we already know it's 16 pixels, right? So I'm just going to change font size to 20 pixels. Well, let's make it more. Is that a font size? Hold on. Yeah, it's a font size. 20 pixels.
You missed semicolon for border. I think that's why it's showing error.
Oh yeah, that's true. So now it has bigger, right? Now if I put, let's put 30. You see? So the height, width is not changing. Width is still 300 pixels. But height is the content height. So you need to understand the default behavior of all of these things, because if I don't provide, what really happens, right? Now here I can actually control the height. So I can say height is, let's say, 20 pixels. Now look at it all messed up, right? Because my font is much bigger than my height. So I'm forcing it to become smaller, right?
So height should be more than, it should be always like, if we wanted to explicitly
yes,
give, then it should be more than the font size.
Or don't even give a height, so then it becomes,
yeah.
Okay.
Based on the content, it will decide.
Yeah, let the content decide your thing. Okay, so this is, so you understand block, right? Now let's convert this into inline block. So remember the block was a display property. So by default it's display block, right? But we're gonna call it inline block. Look what happened now. Remember, it became like this now, right? Now it doesn't have 100% width. Why? Because it cannot have 100% width. Because now I have to, in 100%, I have to put 4 of these guys, right? So now its height is its content height, and width is also content width. Now if I don't provide, let's say parent, let's say if I don't provide any width to the parent, still the width of each element here is the width of the content. Right? Makes sense? And the entire width is nothing but if you add all the content width, right?
Can you give width to the content? Let's just for check.
Width to the body?
Content, like A.
Oh yeah, you can give width to the content. So obviously you want to do more than this, right? So I don't know the width of this, but I'm just gonna give it like 100 pixel, right? If I do, let's say 10 pixel, which is way smaller then it would just mush everything together, which is not a good idea, right? So by default, if I don't provide any width here or any font size here, okay, it will basically take the content's width and height.
So what is the default value of display is block?
Not every. So like paragraph is block, div is block. Okay.
What about span?
Span is inline. It's not even, span is actually inline, not inline block. There is another one called inline.
Inline block. Okay.
Yeah, there are more than that, but the main one is block, inline block, and inline. Okay, and then there's like a table, flex, and all that stuff. But that's when you're using table or flex, right? But by default, each element, so div is block, paragraph is block. Most of the elements are actually blocks. Span is inline, so if I do span, okay, it's actually inline. So if I look at the span, and if I go to computed, And now I just do display. As you can see, it's inline. Okay. So what's the difference between inline block and inline? So inline block is by default, it's the contents height and width, right? That you already know, right? So hello is basically nothing but its content. So here, if I just say, hello, my name is, let's say, no, right? As you can see, the content going bigger, it's adjusting its width accordingly. Height is still the same because of the font height, right? So this is inline block. So inline is almost similar as inline block, but with inline block, you can actually, I can specifically say width, let's say 400 pixels, 300, 200 pixels or something like that. Okay. So I actually specified, and now hello also, they are all four is the same size because I now specified it. And let's say if I add class equal to a here, also to the, how it does, it overwrite what span usually was, but we don't want to do that. So I'm just going to create another class called C, and for C, what I want to do is I just want to give it a width. So let's, or border. So I'm just going to give it a border, and I'm going to give it a little different border. Let's say blue. Okay. So now it's a contents width and height. But if I do width equal to, let's say, 300 pixels, it's not going to take it. So with inline elements, it doesn't really care. You cannot give it a width. You cannot give it a height. It always the content size and height and width. And that's why span, which is an inline element, it does not take any external height or width or anything.
So we should not use span, like based on very specific requirements we can use span, otherwise we don't use much span, right?
Span is basically, let's say if I have a text like this inside and I want to change the color of name, right? Then I can actually add span here. Right? And I can give it a class. Class, let's say C. Right? Now, or here, let's, instead of border, I need, let's say, font color, right? So red. So now it doesn't matter if even if I give it here like a 500 pixel width, it's not going to change its width. So if I want a text inside a text and I want to change some style, it's a span is the ideal because it doesn't take the width or height. It just basically simple text.
What are the other, okay, I'll check. I was thinking what are other inline block elements, but I'll check.
So, yeah. So most of the elements are, think of their blocks. Span is inline obviously, but yeah. I don't know the whole list, but you can actually, there must be, like you can always check what are the inline elements in HTML. You can do it like this. So yeah, all of these image, well, yeah, a lot of them you probably won't even heard of them. These are all, yeah, and you can see span is one of them. Yeah, right here. Yeah. And let's say.
But the width of input we can, I think, change, right? We use input tags or like input type button, input type text. Then we can change.
But input is a button. Is a not here you're saying input?
input button. We can also manage the height and width of button also.
Let's see. I'm not sure if list of block elements. Okay, maybe this is okay. So list of block elements. So these are all the block, all the H1 paragraph, all that stuff are the blocks, right? Now let's say, okay, list of inline elements. Button. Yeah, let's try this, right? So we can put button here. Instead of span, let's put button, right? And let's call it a button so we know. Okay. And instead of 500, let's make it 200.
Button is acting. Okay. Yeah,
okay.
It's fine. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, here the button
It's
size.
width, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure why they said button. Maybe this website is wrong. But let's just check. Actually, it's instead of speculating.
It's not the main concept for like we usually mainly use span in our coding.
Yeah, height also you can see is changing here with a button, right? So let's see. Let's look at it. Actually, I want to see if the button.
Maybe I have another meeting.
Okay.
So...
Oh, it's actually inline block. So they are wrong in their website, as you can see. Okay.
I have to go out for something. So.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay, Aman. Yeah, we are gonna just stop here in a minute, but yeah. So that button is actually not an inline element; it's inline block. I think they're wrong here. you never trust all these websites. Sometimes they're wrong, right? Yeah. Okay. All right.
One more thing, just wanted.
Sure.
Is it possible? Can we as for students, we can make a WhatsApp group and study together, so we can discuss our different ways. Like one problem I did it in one way, and someone else did it in another way, so we can learn how to do one thing in different ways.
Yeah, I think feel free to do it. You include me as well. That's fine. Yeah.
I would say like everyone can drop a number on chat box, and I'll make a group.
Yeah. That would good. Yeah.
Okay, so my number is this. You already know this, but.
Emil, do you want to add, because like we will talk and you might be disturbed?
Oh, that's fine. I want to know what's Yeah, that's fine.
I gave my number. Did you got that?
Yeah.
I got it.
I've done a lot of groups.
I got two numbers. Chandra number I have.
Hey Bhuvneshwari, do you want to give your number as well? Feel free. And also put Chandra's number if you know.
I have Chandra number, WhatsApp number.
Oh, okay. Good.
Yeah, it's like, WhatsApp has changed a lot of stuff.
I know. Okay, so you got the Bhuvneshwari's number as well. So, okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, I get my number, send me a request file. I'll
just writing that numbers. Okay, I don't have...
I have to leave for some other work, so, okay.
Okay, all right, Hamad. We're gonna stop here anyway. Okay. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
I got all the numbers. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Syed. So, any question on this? Yeah. Yeah. So you can go through. I think you can investigate yourself some of the elements. I think maybe what they meant is like an inline block element. I'm not sure what they meant. But yeah, you can pick like your properly all the famous elements, like and then table field set div. So here the main one is like h1 tags and paragraph and ul tag. Yeah. Okay. All the blocks.
I mean, actually, the main problem with JavaScript is like once there is problem comes, like I need to add some functionality or I need to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not able to. There is specific part of project. Okay, just let's an example. On click, it should change the color. I know that how to do it, but if some problem comes like this, I'm not able to think. Oh, by which method I should do this? Like, how should I approach this? Like, how should I divide this problem into parts?
Yeah, that's why I'm giving you a lot of exercises, right? So I think I'm gonna give you exercise based on what we cover, right? So when we eventually, my objective is, I think in, let's say, next 2 3 weeks or so, once we cover all the function stuff, then I want you guys to create like um, a React project, okay? And there, you guys can actually do real programming where you can build something and um, create a click button and all of that. Okay, so you'll get to use it. The reason I don't want you to do it in a pure JavaScript, because then you have to use jQuery and all that stuff, right? Which I don't want you to do. I just want you to use like learn JavaScript and then build a React project, because in real life that's what you're gonna do, right? Or
Okay, actually,
Angular or
yeah, in our
something.
project,
Sure.
what we are doing,
Mm-hmm.
so what we were doing is like we were calling the APIs and we were showing the data into the grid. We used third-party library to
Okay.
show that data into the table grid. We used Angular generic table, and we were thinking to use AG grid also, but we used Angular generic table.
Okay.
And the thing was, the user should be able to edit it. After editing, suppose the value comes like Sahil 10.
Mm-hmm.
The user can edit number 10. But the thing is, after editing, it should send the data type also. Like I